morning, everybody. Today, I want to hop on here and talk a little bit about the timeline difference between the MD application allopathic AMCAS and the DO application osteopathic ACOMAS. A lot of people, most people, I would say, apply both MD and DO, and that's completely normal. It's perfectly fine to do that. There's no issue. There's no shame. Lots and lots of people do that because we all realize that at the end of the day, you're going to end up in the same place. So why wouldn't you throw out more applications and cast your net wider? So there are a few differences between the MD and the DO application, and I'm going to talk just about the timeline today. And as we get into the next application season, which will start in January, we'll probably go into a lot more about some of the nuanced differences. I'm going to do some presentations on AMCAS versus ACOMAS later. And if you're going to come to my application retreat on January 2nd, I'll probably point out some differences there too. But here is some text, keeping it really simple for you, we're going to go through to help you understand just how it's all going to start. So AMCAS and ACOMAS open around the same time. They open around the beginning of May. The dates are always, different every year, but we can bank on it being the first week of May. So here's where it starts to deviate. With AMCAS, it opens in May, and you need to be ready to start filling it out in May. However, you can't submit it until the end of May. Back in the old days, it used to be the beginning of June, and they've bumped it up to the end of May. So you can work on it all month in May, but you can't do anything with it until you get to the end. With the ACOMAS, it opens in May, you fill it out in May. You could technically submit it the first week after it opens if you want to. You don't have to wait. There's no time frame they make you wait. So you can submit ACOMAS as soon as you're done. The big thing about ACOMAS that's different is it has a few pieces that kind of slow people down a bit. And one of those big pieces is connecting your prereqs, the courses you took with their required prereqs. So a lot of the schools actually require you to go through and connect the courses you've taken with their specific requirements. So that kind of slows people down. Also, some of the DO schools have their secondary applications embedded within ACOMAS. So that means that if you're going to submit that school early, you actually have to go ahead and write out the secondary before you submit it. And that catches people off guard. And if you're not quite in secondary mode and ready to start writing those essays in that really deep reflective way, you might not be ready to submit that school in May. Now, that doesn't mean you can't submit your ACOMAS. You can submit ACOMAS and AMCAS with just one school on your list. So what I usually recommend people do is choose one DO school that doesn't have a secondary in it and go ahead and submit it when it's done. And that starts the verification process. So what verification means is that they're cross-checking the courses and the grades that you entered into the application system against what you sent on your transcript. They can't start verification until your transcripts arrive. So even if you open up and submit ACOMAS on the second day, if they haven't received your transcripts, which they might not have on the second day, then nothing's going to happen. They're going to just sit there until your transcripts arrive. You can't send your transcripts until you open up the app. You can't do that early because you need to have your application ID number. There's a unique barcode that they give you in the application that you use if you're sending your transcripts. If it's an electronic submission, then they're going to give you a unique transcript ID number that you're going to use to send that transcript. So there's no way, or I should rephrase that, you should not send your transcripts early. You're going to have to redo it after your app opens. So you submit, your transcripts arrive, some person sits there, they cross-check, what did you enter in for your courses, your grades. They want to make sure everything matches exactly, because the schools, the med schools actually don't see your transcripts. They only see your application. So that's all verification is. However, that can take for DO, 3 days. And for MD, it can take anywhere from 1 week to 6 weeks. It kind of depends on how backed up they get. And honestly, it just depends on sometimes the circumstances surrounding the logistics of it. I remember one year there was a huge technical issue with AMCAS, and they got really far behind. And so everybody was late. Nobody was disadvantaged because everybody was late getting verified. It just meant the cycle started later. We saw that a little bit in 2020 when AMCAS had everyone send their transcripts to a PO box, but they didn't realize that the mail center was going to be locked because of COVID. So they couldn't get anybody's transcripts. So we saw a huge delay in everybody's transcript or everybody's apps getting verified. So anyway, that's what verification means. And that can happen, like I said, between 1 week and 6 weeks. DO schools tend, or AMCAS, AACOMAS, oh my gosh, AACOMAS tends to verify apps very, very quickly. So let's say you submit, hypothetically, the 3rd week of May, your transcripts arrive. You could be verified for AACOMAS by the beginning of June. Once you're verified and you've added your schools in there, the schools will start sending you secondaries. So you could technically start getting secondaries for DO much, much earlier after you're verified. So MD, no matter when you submit, they're not going to send any verified apps to the schools until the end of June. So you could have submitted on day 1, let's just say May 29th. You could have been verified by June 15th. And you're just going to sit there and wait until the day that AMCAS releases all the apps to the schools on, let's say, June 29th. So if you had that 2-week period where you weren't doing anything, your app was just sitting there waiting. That's why I always say there's no rush to submit on the first day. It doesn't make any difference. You can submit on day 1 or day 5. Both of those people are going to get sent to the schools on June 29th at the exact same time. The difference is the person who submitted on June 5th had 5 extra days to make their app better. So now that person has a slight advantage, right? Because they had 5 days to think about what they were doing and add and edit and all of that. So after the med schools, the MD schools get all the apps on the first day. They're going to push a button and send everyone an acknowledgement email. Same thing with DO. And then they're going to start sending out secondaries a day or 2 after that. You don't need to have all of your schools in AMCAS at that point. You can add schools in as you go along. They get your information that night at midnight every night. So if you don't want to get 30 emails on that second day when you're and you want to avoid feeling overwhelmed, you can do this in waves and add like 5 or 10 at a time. So that's kind of how the process works. And there is a lot of other sort of nuanced things that are going to come up throughout this season. For people who might be thinking, well, I'm going to apply to DO much later in the cycle because MD is my first choice. That's absolutely fine. You're sending a message when you apply to DO schools late that they are your backup. So you have to think about that. If you're telling a school, hey, you're my backup, then you're probably going to get treated like a backup as well. They're going to be more interested in the people who applied early and are ready to go. So if you apply late, don't be upset if you don't hear back right away and people are hearing back sooner than you because they submitted sooner than you. That kind of makes sense, right? And so it kind of depends. The other thing about DO schools is they screen fast, they send secondaries fast, they send interviews fast, and they send acceptances fast. So that's a disadvantage in the fact that you could technically, if you applied supersonic speed through DO, got it all done, you could technically be accepted by September. And what that does is it actually puts you at a slight disadvantage because now you have to submit deposits, $1,000 to $3,000 deposits for DO schools, and you haven't even heard back yet from MD. Most people don't hear back from MD schools until December or January. So you're sort of, it's nice you have acceptances, at that point you're going to be a doctor. It kind of takes the pressure off. But if money is an issue, it kind of puts you in that tight situation where you don't want to lose that one spot you have at a DO school, but you're going to have to waste, $1,000 if you want to hold that spot. And you might get other DO interviews later and you might get accepted at them, and they might be different schools that you like better. And so it gets a little tricky. It's a really unfortunate situation. I hate that their deposits are so high. I hope one day that changes, but that's where we're at right now. I'm going to try to go through more stuff like this at the upcoming applicant retreat. And then once we get past that applicant retreat, I am hosting a 10-week seminar for everyone who's applying, and we're going to be going through all of the steps of the application process. I'll be breaking down for you how to do everything, and that kind of puts you in my cohort for the season. And with my cohort, what we do is we meet every week. That's totally free. We meet, we go through all of the details of what you should be doing. I give you all the information you need, and it's a really nice way to check in and have a really supportive community. So I hope to see some of you in that seminar, and otherwise, please reach out if you have any questions. All right, take care, everybody.